Okay. All right. So first of all, let me say on behalf of myself and of OHEL, I want to have to acknowledge OHEL that's allowing me to do that. Our CEO David Mendel and our Presidium of Jay Kestenbaum and Elzachter. But we also are we're hoping and praying for everything to work out well for everybody in Israel, and that all soldiers and hostages should come back safely, and I hope in the zchut of everything that's being done that we'll come to witness that. I'm going to talk and probably hold on one second. Just realized my door's open, so give me a second. Okay, I mentioned about the Shlomo and Yossi. This is my fourth one, third of the day, and one I did last night, so I didn't have time to really adequately prepare. So, and I said my Ritalин's wearing off at this hour, so I'm going to be probably a little disorganized, but I'll try to present it in as coherent fashion as possible. First of all, let me talk about in terms of the students, and obviously students are there, and I'll get in a minute about the whole issue about going home, etc., about how we manage. And this has been, I'm just really going to bring up the issues that have come up in the number of the meetings and the webinars we've had till now. It's interesting in terms of natural trauma recovery. Let's say somebody had a traumatic event that had a beginning and a middle and an end, and now we're dealing with the residual effects. It's an in and out experience. So again, let's say somebody had a residential fire, or somebody had a vehicular accident and have been traumatized. As we know, the trauma comes back and haunts them, whether it's flashback, trigger responses, etc., or dreams, but it's never constant, or no, I shouldn't say never. It's rarely constant. It comes back. They're reminded. They're having some sort of reaction, and then there's a sort of withdrawal, and there's sort of like a replenishment. I've mentioned that when I supervise, let's say, young therapists, and if they have like a very meaningful session, let's say they have a real breakthrough in a therapy session, and they're very excited. If they're a young therapist, that's a very exciting experience. They come in with a great deal of enthusiasm and we process it. And usually at the very end of the supervision, I'll give them a warning, or I'll practice my nevuah. I'll say to them, please don't be surprised if the next session they come in and they talk about the weather, or they'll talk about the Mets. Because sometimes when we've had a very climactic experience, we have to sort of withdraw and collect ourselves. And I think this is going to be very important in terms of the Bachrim in the Yeshiva and the girls in seminary, that what's going on, even though there are reminders, it's always there and we always feel it, but to the extent that we feel it profoundly and then not and are distracted, will probably happen. And it's probably not healthy to be very preoccupied with it. Nor should someone feel guilty if for a period of time they're focusing on something else, or for that matter, even if they're having, I'm not saying a huge amount of jocularity, I think we're all feeling rather somber, but if they have something more recreational happening, if they're going to play some ball, or if they're going to just, enjoy some time together schmoozing or something like that, they shouldn't feel guilty. That's sort of like necessary, and therefore that we can't expect them to have it be fully cognizant, again, unless they really are in a combat zone or in a dangerous situation. There's also a lot to be said when, in terms of, as much as possible, preserving routine. And I don't mean that only in terms of, well, the Limud Torah is a zchut for the soldiers and for the country and for the people, but routine is comforting. If you think about it, what is a trauma? And this is a bona fide trauma. Trauma is a disruption of your routine. Everybody went into the Chagim, everyone went to Shmini Atzeres Simchat Torah, expecting just to be a joyous conclusion of a whole host of Yom Tovim, and suddenly the rug's pulled out from under them, and suddenly the whole world has changed. And that's the nature of trauma. That's what 9/11 was here. That's what, even to some extent, COVID, even though COVID wasn't similar, sudden, but that's what COVID was, and all these other types of sort of, as I said, life-changing events or world-changing events. So sometimes by reclaiming the routine, by getting back into minyanim and your seder and your classes can be very comforting and can be sort of that reassurance that life is going on, although again, albeit altered. So the process, and I'm anticipating for the Talmidim and for the Talmidot, is to try to get back into their routine. Oh, 1 second. There's this. Oh, it's not relevant to me. Okay. Is to try as much as possible to get back into the routine at the same time, acknowledging the reality of the circumstances. So if there is, let's say, decision on the part of the yeshiva or part of the seminary to dedicate an hour to talking about what's happening, to updating, to discuss ways of coping, managing, to put it into some sort of meaningful context, which is probably useful, and to do that periodically. It should be circumscribed. It should be, we're going to do this now for an hour, or even if we're going to have some sort of discussion, group discussion about it. We're going to do it for a certain amount of time, and then we're going to get back into what we're here for. And of course, dedicated in honor of if you want to look at it in terms of the lives that were lost, in terms of Aliyat Nishmatam, in terms of the Schot, in terms of the soldiers coming back, in terms of the country recovering from this. We can dedicate that, but to get back and reclaim the routine. Now, let me address also for a few minutes the issue that I know is coming up a lot here in the States, and I'm assuming it's impacting on you, is parents of children in yeshiva or seminary who, should they bring them home? Should they let them stay? And what should they do? Now, everybody may have their sort of emotional reactions to that, but look at it in terms of look at it maybe more purely psychologically. And I think it would be a disservice to have some sort of universal rule or some sort of universal approach to this. Again, purely psychologically. I'm not talking about ideologically, etc. But the approach we're taking with these parents, and we're being hounded by these calls, is it's know your child. First of all, these are adult children. So whatever decision you make should be done in conjunction with them, and maybe, if applicable, in conjunction with you, with the Rosh Yeshiva, with the educators. But also have a conversation with them. And it really depends on the child. I don't think you can make a universal rule. Well, so for example, if you have a child with some severe anxiety, then maybe for that child, staying in Israel under these kind of circumstances may be ill-advised. You might have, in the opposite end, you might have a child who's got too little anxiety. It might be a child who's by nature more impulsive and reckless. Well, that might be dangerous, and then again, it may be ill-advised if they're not going to be careful about where they go and what kind of safety precautions they take. Now, we're talking about the fringe ends. Most of the students in your yeshiva, I call them child, the young adults in your yeshiva are, like most people, are somewhere in the middle and are probably pretty well adjusted and normal and not beset by high degrees of anxiety or depression, etc. So that for them, there remains the possibility of them to stay. I think also in terms of how they perceive their time in yeshiva and their time in seminary may have some bearing on that decision, which again requires a conversation. Let's say a family that is very committed to Aliyah and very committed to their children living in Israel, and this year is that part of those steps that move in that direction. For them, it may be more compelling to stay. For those who really look at it as, let me get an Israel experience, but I'm going to really map out my life or chart my course back home in, let's say, in the States or something like that, then there may not be as compelling a reason for them to stay if the situation is dangerous. Sometimes the issue came up as, well, we'll forget about the kid. What about the parents? What if the parents are extremely anxious and worried? And that can have, I think, secondarily some bearing. I mean, it's in the nature of parenting that you do what's right for your child. You put your own needs and issues aside and do what's right for the child. But let's say if the child is on the fence, or let's say it is, or for that matter, if it's a very severe reaction that a parent might have, then maybe that has to be factored in as well. If we look at the boys in yeshiva, it may make a difference if this is a boy who really, a young man who is really taking learning very seriously, is progressing a lot, and there's a perception that his learning or his dedication to learning again can serve in the interest and the well-being of the country, or for that matter, that it's very much part of his emerging and developing into a Talmid Chacham, that may have also bearing. If he's a kid who's, let's say an average or not a very strong learner, and yes, he wants that experience, and yes, he wants to have that foundation. So maybe later in life he can do the Daf Yomi, or he would be able to pull out a Mishnah Berurah and look up halachas. Then it may not be as compelling. So there's, it's not one size fits all. I think it really is a matter of knowing the child, and it should be a collective decision. I don't think we have to comment or commit, or for that matter, I think we should refrain from judging, because every kid is unique, and I think it very much is something that should evolve from conversation. In terms of the students' distress, I was saying this. Okay, some chats are coming here, but I think it's more for the tech person. And this is being taped, so for some reason people are unable to get on. By the way, if it helps, I didn't get the passcode. I don't know if that's the problem for anybody else. So I needed to okay, great. If that can be passed on, that might help. Okay, in terms of I'll get in a minute about communicating with parents, but in terms of the students coping, let me just talk about some of the things we're finding that is helpful. First of all, this is a trauma, and it's a trauma for them to be in a situation where sirens are going off and they're going into the miklat, or for that matter, in being in such close proximity to such atrocity and danger and war is traumatic. One could say even it's primarily traumatic, but if it's not, here in the States we talk about it more as terms of secondary trauma, but I think when you're in such close proximity, one could even talk about it as primary trauma. So how does one cope? So first of all, it is very helpful for them to talk about it. Talking about it alone, and talking doesn't mean incessant talking, doesn't mean obsessive talking. But from time to time, whether it means getting them together in a group, whether it means dedicating some of the time during the day for an opportunity to express emotions and thoughts and feelings, we know from a lot of research in trauma that when trauma is experienced, it's just even anatomically, it's the part of the brain that's processing it is deep in the brainstem, is a primitive part of the brain, governed a lot by emotion, fear, impulse, the amygdala, those parts of the brain deep in the brain stem, which we share with the animal kingdom. Once you put it into words, in fact, studies have even shown that once you put it into words, you can actually literally see the activity shift in the brain from that very primitive part of the brain to this part of the brain, the frontal cortex, the Broca center, which are the most advanced parts of the brain, the part of the brain that we don't share with the animal kingdom, part of the brain we use all day in classes and in learning. And that gives us, in a way, bias. It gives us ownership over it. So it is something important, and it is helpful to the students to express their fears, to express their pride, to express their determination, whatever might be relevant, to give it a voice. But again, not that obsessive, repeated, constant, but give it an opportunity to give it a voice. The other thing that's very useful with trauma is to have something to do. Trauma is fear, and fear comes from a feeling that something is threatening. So classic fear would be, you're walking down the street and the lion's running after you, looking to have you for lunch. Your immediate response is fear, and that fear prompts action. You run away, you climb a tree, you shoot the lion, you do something to save yourself. Unfortunately, in situations such as the situation we're dealing with now, there may be nothing for them to do in the yeshiva. So I think it's very important to emphasize to them that their learning and their studies is their contribution to the cause, and let them volunteer if that's possible. Let them say extra tefillot, but give them the sense that they are participating. I mentioned in a previous webinar, I heard about this, on the first day Yom Tov here in Galot. We have 2 days. And, as the day evolved, the reality of what was happening became more and more apparent. And that night when I went to sleep, I had this anxiety dream. I had a dream that I was presenting a patient at a conference, and that I was going to actually present the patient. I was bring the patient, which of course we don't do, but it was a dream. Um, and then in the middle, while we're driving, I don't remember if we were driving or on a bus or something, he said, "I'm too scared to do this," and he got off and he disappeared. So now I didn't have my presentation, so I went back to my office. So I figured I'll present the case without him, but I had to find my notes. And of course, all my notes today are on the computer. But then in the dream, they were all paper. Papers were all over the place, and I couldn't find the notes about him. And then I realized that I'm supposed to present in 1 hour, and the conference is an hour away, and I don't have my notes. And of course, woke up with that kind of anxiety from a dream. And I thought about it after I woke up, and I realized I think the dream symbolized to me my helplessness. I can't do anything. This atrocity is happening. This horrible events are happening, and there's nothing I can do. And after the Sunday night, after the second days, when I came back, we were staying in Montreal with our kids. When I came back, and I was dreading opening up my phone and seeing the news, and then the calls came in, and the emails came in, and we need to set up, we need to post advice to parents. We need to schedule a webinar. People were calling about their own situations, and I got busy, and it was a tremendous relief for me in terms of my trauma because I was doing something, I was active. So again, being active and doing something is extremely important and will be helpful. And again, it can be part of what you're doing with them in yeshiva and seminary because that fits. But dedicating it, or as I said, saying extra tefillah, taking on certain. In fact, I was talking with my wife, and we decided we're going to do something on Shabbat now that is not an absolute necessity, but enhances there's a little more, it's like a chumrah of sorts that we want to take on again because of what's happening. That's great hashkafically, but it's also great psychologically. In terms of communicating, I'll get back to some other points about what can be done for the students. But let me bring up. I'm keeping up. I'm almost done with my time. Connection with parents, and it's very important. Parents are trusting their children with you under scary and difficult times, and communication with parents is very important, but not incessant. I think what makes sense is maybe a daily email to the parents, how the day went, to the point. We didn't have any sirens today. The students were able to get through their lessons, were able to learn together. Shir was given. We dedicated this or that, but just very succinct and to the point to let the parents know you're watching over the children. You're taking their pulse. You're aware of what's happening. They're entrusting their children, even though these are adult children, they're entrusting the children to you. And and we live in a day and age. I always say jokingly, when I was a kid, my parents sent us at the sleepaway camp, and when we came home 2 months later, they hoped we had all our limbs. There wasn't this constant oversight. We didn't have the technology for it. We didn't have the nanograms. We didn't have email. So today, in the day and age when you can call Israel, FaceTime, Zoom, like I'm doing right now, there is more of an expectation to have some oversight. So I would encourage, again, you don't have to call, you don't have to send them 10-page emails, but a little contact every single day. And I think in terms of the children, again, you can't control how much contact they have, but it might be advisable, again, not too much and not too little, and because too much might generate more panic, and too little, of course, might generate the fear of feeling disconnected. So again, I would try to orchestrate and encourage contact, but again, with proper kind of limitations. It is possible that sometimes with trauma, a reaction remains dormant and comes out later. So you might have a student who feels that they're okay staying and they're doing well and the parents are okay with it. And then in a month or two, suddenly they start panicking. That can happen and it needs to be addressed at that time, but don't think that's anything. You might be surprised by now let's hopefully things are better. But still, why would it come out now? That's sometimes, even if God willing, this is resolved quickly and everything gets back to normal quickly, it still can come out at a later point. Try to also highlight the positive. This stories abound of heroism, of sacrifice, of unity, and make that part of the narrative to balance it. There's another piece that's very important, and I'm sure many of you are aware of some of the research, mostly coming out of Emory University, on the importance of ancestry. That first of all, shockingly, how one study found that 3 out of 4 Americans can't name all their grandparents. And a study in the UK found that only 1 out of 5 can name all their great grandparents. All right, that might be a little more not as shocking, but but the research shows pretty conclusively that individuals who have an awareness of where they come from, of their ancestry, and families where the family story is communicated, the children have more resilience and cope better. And therefore, putting these events, as horrific as they were, as not as these consuming events, as where we have a past, present, future, and if you're just focusing on the present, it's almost intolerable. But if you can put it in the broader context, which is that this comes in the history. We have a long history of prejudice, persecution, dating back to the Bible, dating back to Yaakov and Esav, Yitzhak and Yishmael. And that this is a chapter in a much bigger story makes it not good, but make it more tolerable. It fits in that broader context. And there's no better place than seminary and yeshiva to cast it in that way. And when I say in our history, I'm talking past and future. Rav Soloveitchik once brilliantly said that the difference between the secular historian and the Jewish historian is the secular historian looks at the past to understand the present. The Jewish historian looks at the future to understand the present. In whatever ways, as mysterious as this might be, we're going somewhere. We're heading somewhere. And the fact that all this fits both in the historical context and in our destiny can be, again, doesn't in any way mitigate the pain of the losses and the suffering that's going on. But for those who are viewing it, and maybe not as immediately involved, it makes it more tolerable. And as I said, you're in the ideal setting for this. I was also asked to speak very quickly about your own struggles, because children are home, you have to teach, and you're also, again, you're having a much more immediate connection with those who are serving. The way we handle those kind of situations is we make the atypical typical, we make the abnormal normal. We redefine what we call routine. And I think you're probably starting to do that already, if not done it already. But this new reality of having to manage kids at home and go to work, and then you're preoccupied and you're worried, you're in the process right now of making that your new reality and making that your new routine, and it will fall in place. And we get very creative and effective. And this was evident during COVID, where we saw some tremendous human ingenuity in terms of how people adapted and adjusted to this new reality. And you're gonna do the same. So allow that process to take place, allow that process to develop, and hopefully you'll then have a standard routine that allows for both your responsibilities in terms of teaching and in terms of your responsibilities for family. I'm going to stop at this point because I want to leave some time for questions or comments, or if you're aware of something that I may have left out that you'd like me to address, I'm happy to do that. I know it's a limited crowd for some reason, but if anybody does have something, or is that Johnny? Is that your hands up, or? Let me hear it. Good. Let's see.
Yes. One of the points that I made is that this generation of kids has skills that my and your generation did not. So that all these kids who came from the United States, I did a couple of presentations here in Israel, and I said to them that words like shelter in place, lockdown, staying calm. When I was a kid, there were no such thing as school shooting. Nowadays, it's you're training your kids, and they actually possess skills that they don't realize they have. And they have to be reminded, because we have a tendency to forget skills in a time of high stress and panic. But in fact, they are in possession of things that they can call on because they have been trained to a certain extent, which is not something that my generation experienced.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a point well taken. And I sometimes people ask me how I can deal in tragedy and trauma and death so much all day. And one of the answers I give them is I don't just see horrible. I see strength, I see resilience, I see love, I see camaraderie. But yes, I think I think it's good to empower them. I think it's a very good point, and remind them that they have certain survival skills that are adapted to the reality of a world where somebody can carry a missile on their shoulder somewhere in Gaza and it can reach Tel Aviv and Yerushalayim. And it's a scary reality, but we have the wherewithal to handle it. And I think it's good to remind people. I was speaking to the rabbis this morning from the RCA, and one of the things I encourage them to do, because then you imagine they just finished, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and they, Mar Cheshvan, it may be Mar for us, but it's not for them. They a chance to get back on their feet, replenish, and now they're busy with this. And I encourage them to remind themselves how great they are and how important they are, because we need that. We need that. We could feel knocked down, and we need that. And I think it'd be great to do with the students as well, and how important their learning is, and how important their study is. That's in many ways that's going to help too. It's going to ensure the safety of the country and its people as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Please, Johnny, go ahead.
Can I make one more point?
Yeah, please.
That might be helpful. I suggested to the kids that they create coping cards. That I know that when I had my driver's test, and the instructor said to me, take a piece of paper, write down your name, your insurance agent, your phone number, your parents, because if you have an accident, you'll forget everything. So what I encourage the kids to do is to create coping cards for themselves on 3 levels. One being the bodily, physiological, biochemical, the second being emotions and thoughts, and the third being behavior and actions. What is it that calms you down? But write it down now and carry that card with you, so that when you find yourself in a high stress situation, actually take out your coping card, look at it, and remind yourself what it is that you do for yourself to bring you down.
It's interesting you say that, because the style now, as I'm sure you know, for dealing with, let's say, children for coping before, not only these kind of stressful situations, but just general anxiety, all that, is to familiarize the child, like you said, with their bodily reactions. When you feel this, that might be anxiety. And when you feel that, this might be. And again, the question might be, why now do they need that? Like, we didn't know what we were feeling. We didn't know what that response meant. And the answer for that is that, again, the generation raised in the age of technology, in the age of technology, you're used to everything coming to you. You don't have to go to the store. You can click a mouse and the groceries come to you. You don't have to, buy a newspaper. You can click a mouse and the news comes to you. So we're used to that, things coming to you. So identifying reactions, to know that when the heart is pounding, you're feeling scared. That has to be so deliberately told, like you said, like with the cards, is a reflection of times we live in, and that generation, which are used to more things coming to them. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else have any questions? So you want to put in the chat, you can. I just see there's something in the chat, but I think it was more like about getting on, right? Right. That didn't. Okay. Anything else? I'm going to put in the chat my contact information. I'm going to give you my regular Gmail, not my OL Gmail, because it's a little easier. And let me give you my cell phone number. Again, you have to put in the country codes and all that. Okay, so if Oh, no, I made a mistake. That's okay. These are the ways to reach me: cell phone, email, WhatsApp, messaging. So if something comes up, or if you're more comfortable, if you want to discuss something on a more one-to-one basis, feel free to reach me. I do want to thank Benny Babad from Relief and Shlomo Katz from Relief, and the Amudim crew, the Yossi and Tzvi Glock from Amudim, for arranging this. Okay, so there's a file being shared. Okay, for those. Okay. Okay, great. In terms of de-stressing, that's very good. Okay, if there's, okay, Yossi, if, not Yossi, Shlomo, is there anything else, or? Okay, thank you. That means I'm dismissed. Okay, very good. All right, thank you very much. Feel free to contact me if I can be any further help. Johnny, great seeing you, and be safe. Hope everyone in your family's well, and if everybody else is well. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.